couple of weeks ago, I was listening to an interview with the physicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, who was talking about lifelong learning. He commented that often we give the impression that learning is confined to our school days. And by celebrating the end of the school year and making a big thing out of finishing school altogether, we might inadvertently give the impression that learning is over and that we're saying hurrah to that. That interview made me think more about the kind of thing that I've said to my own children, and particularly to my daughter Trinity, who is now in her final year of sixth form. Are there times when it looks as though I've been saying, just get through this next period of time and then it will all be over? The thing is, lifelong learning is important. If we all stopped learning as soon as we completed any formal education, then I don't think we'd be very interesting people. And if we're not open to learn, and if we're not open to engage with new ideas and different opinions, then we won't grow, and we'll miss out on so many interactions that might prove to be a blessing to us. It's so frustrating to try and talk to someone who thinks they know all that they need to know on a given subject, and who can't make any room to hear or try and understand someone who has a different perspective. Today's Bible reading says a lot to me about the idea of lifelong learning. Our focus in this passage is on the disciples, and the very word disciple should make us think about learning. A disciple is a person who is committed to learning by closely following a teacher or a school of thought. So in a Christian context, as disciples of Jesus, we are committed to learning the way of Jesus by following his example and practicing it in our living. The disciples we read about in the Gospels have a special relationship with Jesus, but still they say and do inappropriate things. They keep children away from Jesus. When they're invited to trust Jesus, they panic. And when they're asked to stay awake and watch and pray, they go to sleep. Immediately after this passage, they're trying to stop people who aren't in their group from casting out demons in Jesus' name. They think they're the special ones and that others can't do the work of Jesus. But Jesus puts them right. Anyone who isn't working against us is for us, he says. The disciples always seem to be misunderstanding Jesus and what Jesus wants them to do. And perhaps in some ways that's positive. After all, if you're anything like me, then you learn more from the times you've made a mistake and have had to go back and try again than you do from the times when you get something right straight away. A couple of days ago, I received a thought for the day from a friend that said, things might be going wrong according to your plans, but are going right according to your evolution. In other words, we learn more, we change more, and we grow more when things don't go exactly as we think they should. It can be uncomfortable for us to read about the disciples sometimes because they act like a mirror in which we see ourselves, and what we see reflected back at us is not always a good thing. Generations of followers of Jesus have been just like those first disciples, just like us. We can be slow to get the point. We have a tendency to focus on human things rather than divine things. We try to narrowly define the mission of Jesus and make judgments on who is in and who is out. But seeing ourselves reflected in those disciples can also be hopeful and transformative. For a start, Jesus never has enough of them and tells them to get lost. Jesus doesn't think, what a useless group of people I've got here. Perhaps I better look for a new bunch. And after the resurrection, the disciples are reclaimed and recommissioned by Jesus and given a new task. And I don't know if it's just the way the stories are written, but they certainly seem to have a much better grasp of what Jesus is all about after his death and resurrection. Today's reading shows us three important things about the disciples and three important things we can learn from them. Firstly, despite the failures of the disciples, they get special attention and instructions from Jesus. It's the kind of thing a teacher might do today. If a pupil is struggling in a particular subject, the teacher might arrange for some extra tuition for them to help them understand better, and this could be one-to-one or in a small group. Here, Jesus wants some private time with his disciples because there are things that he wants to teach them on their own. He tries to keep a low profile so that they're not followed by the large crowds that were so often a feature of his ministry. There are things that are just for the disciples to learn about at this point, and they need some space in order to do that. Jesus wants to teach them. Jesus wants to prepare them for life in the reign of God. Jesus wants to prepare them for leadership and service in the future, knowing that he would not be around for too much longer. If the disciples in some way mirror the church, they show us that a lot of Jesus' teaching is not intended for the wider world. A lot of the things that Jesus teaches are intended for those who have already committed to follow him. A lot of Jesus' teaching is for those who have been called and commissioned by Jesus and who are bound together in this special community. We are church. We are people who are committed to following Jesus and who have been called and commissioned by him. And so all the private things that Jesus taught his disciples are just as much intended for us to hear and understand and learn from. Secondly, even the disciples think that Jesus' message is really confusing. They don't understand what he's saying or what he means. But they've made mistakes before and they're a bit wary. Nobody wants to put their hand up and admit that they don't get it. Last time one of them got it wrong, Jesus turned around and said, "Get behind me, Satan." They don't want to risk that kind of response again. And so they feel a bit intimidated and they keep quiet. They don't ask questions. They're deflated and embarrassed by their previous gaffes. So when Jesus asks them what they were arguing about, they keep quiet because deep down they know that they're arguing over something stupid. They're arguing over something that's just not important. They're arguing over something that misses the point of all the stuff that Jesus has tried to show them. They may not understand much, but they do understand that they're out of order. But even so, Jesus isn't finished with them. The third thing that we can learn from the disciples here is the message that Jesus conveys. Jesus teaches the disciples a lesson in being a servant. Jesus actually redefines for them what greatness means. Jesus offers new ideas about what is great, what is success, what is failure. And he teaches them what he meant when he said to Peter in chapter 8, "You are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." Jesus shows them that setting our minds on divine things means paying attention to the least. It means putting aside our privileges and becoming the least. To show us this, he uses the example of a child. The child represents someone with the lowest status. They have no rights, no voice. They are always under someone's authority and control. But Jesus shows the disciples how caring for those who are powerless and on the edges, those who for some don't even seem to exist, creates a chain of relationships or a fellowship of hospitality. Whoever welcomes such a child in my name welcomes me. Whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Where the disciples are arguing among themselves about power and greatness and position, Jesus directs them to look out and open their arms and their hearts to the powerless. What does this mean for us as disciples? What does this mean for us as church? Incidentally, someone once told me that the plural of disciple is church. That's all church is, a group of disciples united together because we want to follow and learn from Jesus. It's easy to become focused on our own issues and think that they're the most important thing. When we think that we're really quite important and perhaps indispensable, or we think we need to hold on to the power we've got, it's easy to forget what Jesus said about greatness and about service. When we're worrying about keeping the show on the road, it's easy to overlook the command to open our arms to the powerless. We face many challenges at the moment, challenges from within ourselves and challenges from the world around us. Every day we're brought short by images of people in terrible need, people who are overlooked and not heard. Every day we hear about the impact we're having on the environment and the damage we're doing to God's wider creation. In the last couple of weeks, a lot has been circulated about the devastating impact that the reduction in universal credit will have on those who are already poor and struggling. And perhaps you've signed one of the petitions that's going around. In the face of so much need, Jesus asks us to put aside our own disagreements and differences, our arguments about who is the greatest, if you like, and Jesus challenges us to love and to care. Jesus challenges us to discover true greatness in the selfless service we give to others. Jesus asks us not just to imagine we're serving him when we're doing something for someone else, but to understand that it is him we are serving. He is the powerless one, the marginalised one, the scapegoated one, the voiceless one the world wants to ignore and overlook and blame. And no matter how long we've been following Jesus, it's a lesson we all still need to learn. Jesus invites us to learn from him and to find in him every day the blessing and fulfillment that comes from reordering our priorities and our ideas about value and worth and greatness. We may not be the most attentive pupils. We may not apply ourselves as diligently as we could, but Jesus invites us to commit ourselves to the enterprise of lifelong learning in God's kingdom. Lifelong learning, lifelong growing, lifelong walking with him. Extra help is there for us in the Spirit. We won't get kicked off the course if we make a mistake. We are loved and accepted and welcomed, and we are invited to walk, to follow, and to learn. May the Spirit help us on our journey this week. Amen.